Alright guys, today we'll cover what airgun tuning is, why we do it, and how to go about it. We'll talk about the 5 golden rules of tuning, as well as 10 key things to remember while you're doing it. We'll cover airgun parts you need to know, like regulator, valve, hammer, hammer spring, plenum, and chronograph. I'll share with you the story of 8 custom tunes across 3 different types of pellet and 4 types of slug. We'll field validate 7 of those tunes at distances like 50, 75, and 120 yards. I'll walk you end to end through a tune, and we'll get you familiar with the concept of the tuning rainbow. We'll explore the performance capabilities of the Venturi Avenge-X 25 cal and give you a rundown of the gun to get you familiar. And we'll test 2 brands of aftermarket moderators and discuss their influence on things. This project's been several months in the making, folks, so sit back, relax, maybe grab something to take some notes with. We'll be back in a minute. AEAC is made possible by Venturi, Hawke Sport Optics, Diana Airguns, FX Airguns, Sabre Tactical, Air Arms, Leapers and UTG Pro, Zan Projectiles, Air Marksman, and Predator JSB Match Diablo. And you guys know the best way to thank them. Alright, before we get too deep into this, let's cover parts you need to know and get you a little familiar with the Avenge-X. Okay, so what's a regulator do? Easy. A regulator takes a higher varying air pressure and turns it into a lower steady one. Now a great example of that would be like the air in this airgun bottle. As it's consumed by your gun, its pressure drops from high to low. And the regulator's job is to take that varying air pressure and keep it consistent for your gun's hammer and valve. And the regulator in your Avenge-X is easily adjustable. Now try to think of your gun's regulator as its master flow control into the system. It is the air's first stop on the way out of the bottle. The more you open it up or turn it up, the more overall flow potential you're charging the gun with. But that's also more air that your downstream hammer and valve have to contend with. Now it's really not as bad as all that. They're perfectly equipped to do so. But there's a balancing act that needs to take place there between reg, hammer, and valve that I want you to put in the back of your mind and start thinking about. And we'll come back to that. All right, so what's the valve do? Simple. The valve takes the steady flow of air coming out of the regulator and turns it into a metered pulse for your gun to be able to use. In other words, it takes the psh and it turns it into a. And the valve does this by way of the hammer. The hammer collides with the valve, briefly opening it. Pew pew! Pew pew! Pew 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 pew! You guys get it. So these are the parts you need to know to be able to follow along for the remainder of the video. The regulator, the hammer, and the valve, and the delicate balancing act that needs to take place amongst the 3 of them. Whoa! Scope cam, 120 yards, 34 grain, Mark II, 850 tune. Scope cam, 120 yards, 34 grain, Mark II, 850 tune. Alright guys, I'm gonna lay some heavy definitions on you, but don't let them freak you out. Their teachings will be at the core of this video throughout. And by the end, you'll have a good understanding of them. Promise. Okay, so what is tuning? Why do we do it? And how the heck do we go about it? Tuning is the process by which we adjust the gun into a state of harmony and accuracy for any ammo or weather conditions. We tune to control performance so that we can achieve the best accuracy, power, and efficiency no matter what. With an organized approach, we search and test for system harmony at an accurate velocity. This is the what, why, and how of what we'll be doing today and boils down to search, adjust, control. And I'm going to take you step by step through how to do it, building you a foundation of knowledge and validating the results along the way. Yeah, baby. I like it. The X is completely modular, meaning that barrel caliber, bolt probe, stock style, cylinder or bottle can all be easily changed out. It's even got a reversible cocking lever. This makes the gun customizable to the needs of most any task. The X also takes advantage of an externally adjustable regulator, an externally adjustable hammer spring, and an externally adjustable transfer port. And this makes the gun tunable to the needs of most any ammo or weather conditions. That wind smeared him pretty good. The X's externally adjustable regulator is accessible here. Its readout is here. Opening the regulator, or turning it counterclockwise, increases airflow to the valve. Closing the regulator, or turning it clockwise, decreases airflow to the valve. Remember, the reg's job is to take the varying air pressure in this bottle and regulate it into a more manageable and consistent level for the downstream valve to be able to cope with. The externally adjustable hammer spring is accessible here, and by adjusting it, we can control the force at which the hammer smacks open the valve, controlling how much it opens as well as for how long. Turning the hammer spring adjuster clockwise causes the hammer to smack the valve open with more force. Turning it counterclockwise causes it to hit it open with less force. But we'll come back to all that. All right, now the pathway of air as it travels through the gun is out of the cylinder or bottle, through the regulator, up into a temporary staging area called the plenum, through the valve, up the transfer port, and out the barrel. Damn ants everywhere. All right, so we've learned some important parts. We've talked about what tuning is and why we do it, and we've learned our way around the Avenge-X. But how do you actually tune? In other words, what are the sequential steps you take to easily and successfully go about it? The first thing I want you to do is to pick a random reg pressure to start out with. Don't care what it is, so long as it's on the lower side of what you've heard is good and proper. Next, I want you to back way off your hammer spring tension. Begin shooting over a crony, and then slowly start to bring hammer tension up until your shot-to-shot velocity just begins to start stabilizing, taking at least 10 shots to be sure. Now stop. That newly found hammer spring balance point marks an ideal place to be for the reg pressure you just chose. Take note, you're close to a sweet spot. Continue to tighten your hammer spring tension in ultra small bits at a time now, until you observe your shot-to-shot consistency really tighten up, like within 1 to 3 feet per second of one another. And then don't go any further. You've arrived. Don't increase hammer spring tension much beyond this balance point, or you'll cross over into the right side of what we refer to as the tuning rainbow. We'll get into that more later. Now, if you need more or less velocity, that's okay, but go to the reg, not the hammer spring. Try not to think of the hammer spring as a velocity control device. For the most part, that's the regulator's job. The hammer spring is just there to balance out the valve with your chosen reg pressure. If you need more velocity, increase the regulator pressure, and rebalance the hammer spring tension to match. If you need less velocity, lower the reg pressure, and once again rebalance the hammer spring tension. Now that you've got the basics on how to go about locating balance points between regulator pressure and hammer spring tension, begin testing varying velocities for accuracy, and test at a minimum of 50 yards. 75 is better. Along the way, it's super important to rebalance your reg hammer spring setting with each new velocity tested. Otherwise, your accuracy results just won't be reliable. And remember, always work that hammer spring tension from low to high and slowly. Hammering past the sweet spot is super easy to do. As you go, continue these steps until you find a velocity at which the projectile becomes its most accurate and doesn't hook, wobble, or corkscrew in flight. Then go build yourself out a nice clean tune around that speed. It's really that easy, guys. Alright guys, this is what it looks like in real time, hunting down a regulator hammer spring balance point. Let's pick something random that we haven't tried yet, like say 190 bar, and see where things level out with a 34 grain. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is purge all the air out of the bottle and system. And you'll find the bleed screw on the left side of the gun. By the way guys, this procedure is the same whether you've got the carbon fiber bottle like you see here or the aluminum cylinder. The reason we do this guys is because in order to close the regulator or turn it clockwise or reduce its output pressure, we need to first drain all of the air out of the system. This is done to avoid damaging the reg, as pressures can really spike within it if you don't. So when you do this, what you'll notice is that the air in the bottle or cylinder will empty, as indicated by the gauge on the right side of the gun. However, there will be some residual air left inside the gun itself, as can be detected by looking at the regulator gauge on the left side of the gun. So to purge the gun itself of air, go ahead and give it a light dry fire. By light, I mean with the hammer spring on like 2, 3, or 4, not 5, 6, 7, or 8 turns. This will help to protect your valve, as you don't want to be smacking it around without any air in the system to cushion its movements. And of course, when you're done with your air bleeding, retighten the purge screw. Now we can safely close our regulator. I like to lightly seat it and then open it about a 1/16 of a turn to maybe a quarter or half a turn to begin with, just depending on what your target reg pressure will be. Going the other way isn't a problem, so opening the regulator or turning it counterclockwise or increasing its output flow can all be done with the gun on a full charge of air, as well as on a full bottle and or cylinder. When you're doing this, just try to keep your counterclockwise turns on the reg to no more than about a quarter at a time, and give yourself a couple of dry fires in between to let that reg settle out and help those pressures equalize within it. These practices will help to keep your regulator healthy and serving you with a smile for years to come. As long as we're on the topic of the Avenge-X regulator, I was able to get it to run cleanly at as little as 145 bar. 210 bar is its maximum safe setting. That's a range of about 2100 to 3050 psi. Now after I walk you through this tune, we'll have some fun and start field validating the ones that I came up with for the 25 caliber. But until then, here's the Reader's Digest version of their reg pressure, hammer spring tension, balance points, and their corresponding velocities with varying ammunition. The transfer port adjuster was left in the high position on every single one of them except for the Predator GTO 16.5 grain tune, in which it was set to low. But don't sweat the details of this right now, guys. We will dissect it all later. You'll know exactly what reg hammer spring setting got me what result, and for sure we'll go slow enough for you to be able to follow. So what I'm doing now is slowly working our reg pressure up to our targeted 190 bar. And it goes like this. Turn the regulator adjustment screw counterclockwise in smallish bits at a time, while observing the response you get out of the regulator pressure gauge. Dry firing along the way to help the reg seat into its newly adjusted position, and to help the gauge kind of settle into its final resting place as well. The trick's just not to overshoot your mark, because if you do, you're going to have to drain all the air out of the bottle and or reservoir again, as well as the gun, back down off of that reg setting just a little bit, refill everything back up, and try again, this time hopefully not missing your desired reg pressure. So personally, I like to make large-ish adjustments, for example, like a quarter turn at a time, until I get kind of close to where I know I want to be, and then I start micro-adjusting that regulator screw in the smallest amounts possible in between my dry fires and gauge checking. And as I get close, I'll begin to dry fire more than once or twice between adjustments, sometimes as often as 4 or 5 times, just to make sure I've really got that reg and gauge settled into their final resting places. Because you don't want them moving around on you once you finally get to adjusting the hammer spring, which we'll get to here in just a sec. Yeah, sorry about not being able to see the gauge, guys. It is super early here in Tampa Bay, Florida. As you can see, the sun's coming up in the background there, and the camera does not like it. So remember, guys, as we begin to massage the hammer spring tension into a position that balances out the valve nicely with the regulator pressure we just chose, it's important to work from low tension to high tension and slowly. Reason for this is because it's ultra easy to overshoot those balance points, especially once you start getting close. But you'll know when you are, because shot-to-shot velocity will first begin to tighten up, and then as you continue to advance the tension on that hammer spring adjuster, things will get even tighter. Then they'll get really tight, and if you continue to tighten on the hammer spring tension, you'll notice that they'll all of a sudden go to pieces, and your shot-to-shot velocity will begin to open up, and once it does, you will know that you have officially crossed over into the right side of the tuning rainbow. And this is where a lot of guys get into trouble, because they try to use their hammer spring tension adjuster as a velocity control device, when really that's the regulator's job. Remember, the regulator is your gun's master flow control, and the hammer spring adjustment is just there to bring the rest of the system into harmony with your chosen reg pressure. Now, that said, once you've arrived at the balance point, you can get away with manipulating velocity to a small degree with your hammer spring tension adjuster, but as you can see, there's a relatively narrow window in which you can get away with that. And once you exit that window, you're going to need to add a little bit of reg pressure and rebalance the valve to achieve that higher velocity you're looking for. Or if your found balance point has overshot the velocity in which you are seeking, you can reduce reg pressure and once again rebalance the valve. Remembering that in order to lower reg pressure or turn the regulator adjustment screw clockwise or close the reg, you first got to purge all the air from the gun and its reservoir in order to avoid damaging the regulator. So that's really all we're doing here, guys. We are looking for regulator pressure, hammer spring tension balance points that stabilize velocity at a velocity which brings you ideal accuracy. Hence the need to get out in the field, which we're about to do, and test for accuracy at distances of 50 yards or more at varying velocities until you find one that your gun and ammo likes, all the while maintaining those reg pressure, hammer spring balance points. So I'll continue to tighten hammer spring tension about a turn at a time until I see that shot-to-shot velocity just begin to start stabilizing, which it does at around 6.5 turns. And at around 6 3/4 turns, velocity really tightens up, letting me know that I've arrived at the balance point. So, a 190 bar reg and 6 3/4 turns on the hammer spring stabilized a 34 grain pellet at 865 feet per second. Now, not to get too far off topic here, guys, but you'll notice that your hammer spring settings will change over time. The Avenge-X owner's manual makes reference to this. And the short version of why is because the hammer spring, when under constant tension, just kind of settles out and changes its own stiffness over time. In today's exercise for me is a perfect example of this, because for the last couple of weeks I've been running a max power tune with a 210 bar reg and 8 turns on the hammer spring. And based on my mental roadmap of my gun, I would have thought we would have arrived at around 865 feet per second on a 190 bar reg at maybe 5.5 turns. So as you can see, you're gonna have to do the work on your own and not just copy somebody else's tune. Sure, they'll get you in the ballpark, but you're gonna have to find your own seat. So that's what it looks like, guys. When you're on your own, you'll want to take at least 10 verifying shots, micro-adjusting that hammer spring tension in the smallest possible amounts until your shot-to-shot velocity stabilizes at between 1 and 3 feet per second of one another. And once it does, fill up with air and run an entire shot chart until the air pressure in your bottle drops below that of your regulator setting. When you get it right, it will look something like this. And we'll get into some wrong examples here shortly. When it comes to the long-range accuracy of a tunable PCP airgun, I can't stress enough the importance of staying on that left side of the tuning rainbow. At the reg hammer balance point, you've got a quick, clean, and efficient shot cycle, eliminating any waste air that emerges around the projectile as it leaves the barrel. And that's important to know, and that's what we're seeking with a clean tune, to eliminate that ultra-disruptive to accuracy waste air. Waste air that causes turbulence. Turbulence that will destabilize your pellet or slug right off the bat. And you'll get a ton of that stuff if your tune's over here. Hence the importance of not using your hammer spring adjuster as a velocity control device. But that's just one half of the magic ingredients. The other half is to get the velocity right. As every barrel ammo combo will have a speed that it wants. A velocity and shot cycle that jives with the overall harmonics of your gun setup. Get it all right, and airgunning gets really fun. Bringing us to our first stop, the story of the 25.4 grain, which initially gave me a lot of trouble, until I figured out the speed it wanted out of Air Venturi's 1 in 24 twist barrel. A speed that proved stable, all the way out to 120 yards. Golden rule of airgun tuning number 1, know the speed needs of your projectile. Here's the tune, guys. Regulator set to 156 bar, transfer port adjuster set to high, hammer spring at 2.75 turns clockwise after being backed all the way out, plus 2 little clockwise bumps. Average velocity 911 feet per second. Extreme spread 10 feet per second. Standard deviation 2.82. 57 good usable shots at 46.8 foot-pounds of energy. All out of the little 210cc cylinder. Diablo-shaped pellets most often find their best accuracy and stability at velocities between 850 and 920 feet per second, with 850 to 890 normally being the sweet spot. So, that's where I began, right at 880, and came up with this beautiful tune, which proved to be a total dud in the accuracy department. Moral of the story? Find the right velocity and then go build out a tune around it, not before. And do it at a distance of like 50 or 75 yards, giving yourself a chance to detect the instability, which doesn't always show up at 25. Which brings us to golden rule number 2. Stability trumps accuracy. Pellets can hook and wobble into one hole at 25 or 50 yards and then scatter in the wind by the time they get to 100. So when you're out there checking for accuracy, be on the lookout for any pellet hook, wobble, or corkscrew in flight. If it's there, you're either not at the right speed, or you're not using a projectile that your barrel likes, or both. A dirty barrel can cause it too, as can a tune that sits on the right side of the tuning rainbow. As can an aftermarket moderator that your gun and tune doesn't like. Fortunately for me, this 910 tune took a liking to the DonnyFL Ryu. Aftermarket moderators can be useful to your tune. They can reduce muzzle flip and enhance pellet stability. Not to mention the obvious. The Ryus are modular so you can experiment with length to dial in your accuracy. And they come in different calibers. The one I'm using today is a 30 cal, and it worked better than the 25. Golden rule number 3. Speed trumps tune. A velocity range that gets you accuracy is more important than a tight ES and SD. The pros dial velocity on the fly all the time. Find the right speed, then build a tune around it. Remembering that ES and SD are still important though. Their tightness is a byproduct of a hammer spring tension setting that's in balance with your chosen reg pressure, indicating a happy valve, a clean snappy shot cycle, and efficiency. All good things when it comes to seeking the ultimate in accuracy. The Impulse Air Model 1350 is another aftermarket moderator that took a liking to my 910 tune. It too is modular, enabling you to control length and loudness, as well as refine your tune. Multiple calibers and styles are available, and they do some cool things with colors too. JSB's 25.39 grain pellet has been a good match for the Venturi Avenge-X 25 cal. When tuned to 910 feet per second, 50-yard performance is excellent and 100-yard performance is good. It performed well both with and without an aftermarket moderator. But this squarish shaped pellet is more susceptible to the wind than JSB's King Heavy 34 grain Mark IIs. Which brings us to our next chapter. This is not a good situation. All right, ladies. Y'all gotta go. Go on, yeah. Come on. Not safe up here for you girls. Come on, yeah. Come on, big boy. Get your girls out of here. Nope, keep on moving. JSB's 34 grain pellets liked two velocity ranges, 905 to 910 and around 850 to 860. Not in between. Power output jumped up significantly with either, demanding a firm shoulder, tight grip, perfect follow through, and quickness through the trigger brake. Those four things being key to my success with them. If you want to run 910 feet per second, you're going to be limited to 50 to 75 yards. Much beyond that, and accuracy begins to fall apart. Jesus. 850 to 860 feet per second is the more ideal range. At that velocity, wind resistance, stability, and accuracy are all stellar out to 120 yards. Power and shot count are good too, at 55 plus foot-pounds in warm weather and 41 good shots. All out of the little 210cc cylinder. Truly, this gun is great with them at this 850 tune, and surprisingly, it's not even that loud. Hey, and quick shout out to Ryan Spanigal, an AEAC fan that turned me on to 850 feet per second when he saw me struggling at 910 on Instagram. Thanks, buddy. Here's the tune, guys. Reg set to 175 bar. Transfer port adjuster set to high. Hammer spring plus 5 turns clockwise plus 2 little clockwise bumps. Average 857 feet per second. Extreme spread 11. Standard deviation 2.71 feet per second. 41 good shots at 55.38 foot-pounds of energy. Golden rule of tuning number 4. If one wants more or less velocity, try to go to the reg. That's your master flow control, not the hammer spring. Only use the hammer spring to balance out the valve with your chosen reg setting. It's not really there to work velocity up and down, although you can get away with that to a small degree. The Avenge-X is a really lightweight gun, and in 25 cal it likes to run between 45 and 60 foot-pounds of energy. So muzzle flip can be an issue if you don't lock it down. Another way to combat the jump is with a big ol' fat moderator, like the DonnyFL Yokozuna. Although my 34 grain 850 tune got along just fine with a bunch of them. But the Yokozuna swallowed up the 55 foot-pounds the best, and was the heaviest of them all. It can be ran with a proprietary quick disconnect, or with the traditional 1/2 inch UNF threads. And it too is modular, giving you a lot of control over what you want to do. This one's the 30 cal. Damn ants everywhere. Golden rule of tuning number 5. Ammo matters. A lot. Find the one the barrel likes and at what speed. And when you're shooting competition and money is on the line, sort head size and wait for reliable accuracy. Everything you've seen today is non-sorted. This is the same DonnyFL Ryu you saw me test with the 25 grain, but this one's in 25 cal, not 30. And I think I'll just shut up now and let you enjoy the sounds of this shoot. JSB's 33.95 grain pellet is an excellent choice for the Avenge-X in 25 cal. 850 to 860 feet per second is the number, and stability is superb out to 120 yards, even in high winds. Out of the two, the Mark II's performed better for me, especially when reaching out. but the originals flew just fine to 50. And now on to Slugs.
NSA 33.5, 120 yards.
For Slugs, I retuned for max power, then went and searched for a couple that worked with that tune. Now I fully realize that's a backwards way of going about doing things, but for the sake of exploring the upper limits of the Avenge-X, that's how I did it. The better way to do it is to first try to pick a slug that works with the barrel, then go build out a tune around the speed that it wanted. But lucky for me, the NSA 33.5 grain took a liking to my max power tune. Now conventional wisdom and word on the street will tell you that you want to push airgun slugs upwards of 1,000 feet per second, but keep them below 1,050. But over the years, that just hasn't been my experience. I've seen them stabilize at anywhere between 750 feet per second and 1,050 feet per second. You just never know. So don't be afraid to experiment.
Oh. Woo! Damn headwinds.
Here's the tune, guys. Regulator set to 210 bar. Transfer port adjuster set to high. Hammer spring, 8 turns clockwise. Average velocity, 879 feet per second with a 34 grain pellet. Extreme spread, 12. Standard deviation, 3.28 feet per second. 55 good shots at 58.26 foot-pounds of energy. Couple of things to take note of are that I made this tune with 34 grain pellets and at 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and with a 400cc carbon fiber bottle. In the warm, pellet velocities were 910, 915-ish, pushing 62 to 63 foot-pounds of energy. And on average, slugs weight for weight ran 40 to 45 feet per second slower than did pellets. They also ran a much tighter ES than SD.
Sand 33, 120 yards.
I was at the Bucks-Panthers game a few weeks back and kind of had an oh doo-doo moment realizing how far 120 yards really is, especially when compared to the size of this. It is truly remarkable how far airguns have come in the last 10 years. And the Venturi Avenge-X is a shining example. Speaking of those, my time with the new Hawke Sidewinder has been a good one. Especially notable is how well it got along with my trigger cam scope cam. Not to mention its excellence everywhere. Fit and finish, feel, and performance have been awesome. And turret tracking has been dead on, as has been my side focus to parallax yardage. Throw in a good reticle and break glass and I'm happy as a clam. Zan 30s, 120 yards.
Zan 30s, 120 yards.
And just for fun and to close things out, here's some Zan 30s. Oh, and I almost forgot. I made y'all a quick tune with the transfer port adjuster set to low, using the 16.5 grain Predator GTO tin pellet. Perfect for the barn and where backdrop is a concern. And at 25 yards, they tested out just fine. Here you go, guys. One more. Well, that is all for today, guys. Now from here, you'll want to head on over to the Airgun Nation forum so that you can participate in the discussion thread and the giveaway on the Avenge-X. I'll leave you a link on how to get there in the description down below. So with that, I'm Steve Shalley. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great week, everyone.